Exactly.
Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Hanover Select Board meeting of, believe it or not, August 8th, 2022. Here tonight to do good work for the town and have some fun. I'll just report that in driving in from Enfield tonight, we had a rainstorm and the temperature dropped almost 10 degrees. I would not have made it as a southerner, there's no doubt about that. Before we do public comment, I want to talk with the board and explain to the public what our procedure is for public comment. Which is basically, the chair recognizes someone who wants to speak at public comment. I typically give them about 5 minutes to speak. We then, if they go on beyond the 5 minutes, we ask them to step down. And then we will either address their, if we can, we'll address their concerns at the ready. If not, we'll take them under advisement and address them if we choose at a later time. So those are the basic guidelines that we have been following, and we will continue to follow relative to public comment during our meetings. Select board, questions about that, or issues or comments?
Yeah. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, so our first order of business is public comment. David.
David Sled, 93 Lebanon Street, Hanover, New Hampshire. As far as I can tell, I'm the only person that's ever been restricted to 5 minutes. I've seen numerous people speak who have not, so actually, the last meeting here said that when they came out of the break, he usually gives 5 or 10 minutes for me to speak, but it just depends, but he doesn't, they have an agreement not to speak. Now, I tried last time I was here to speak to Alex, the new town manager, about that this board.
David, can I jump in just 1 second? There's one thing I didn't mention about sort of the rules of public comment. The speaker will address the chair, not specific individuals on the board or the town manager. They will address the chair, and I will decide if I wish any of them to respond. It's also sort of one of the governing rules of public comment.
Yes. Last meeting, I was trying to speak to Alex about the fact that this board and the town manager that's part of it were involved in state and federal crimes. I called Alex for 5 weeks, even though he heard me at the last meeting lay out part of the criminal path of this board is taking. He didn't find it within his interest to call me even since that meeting. So I thought it would be wise for me to try to catch Alex up on the New Hampshire Constitution. Article 8, you should read the whole Constitution, but especially Article 8. The accountability of the magistrates and officers, the public's right to know. All power residing originally in and being derived from the people. All the magistrates and officers of government are their substitutes and agents, and at all times accountable to them. Government therefore should be open, accessible, accountable, and responsive. To that end, public's right of access to governmental proceedings and records shall not be unreasonably restricted. Now, what happened at the last meeting was Peter stopped the meeting after I had spoken for 5 minutes and had 3 officers of the Hanover Police Department come in, arrest me, and chain me. All of the officers were wearing the town of Hanover patch, which is an emblem of Dartmouth College's. You can see that. You can see them sitting here. They both have on the. They've already got the place pre-loaded up with police with Dartmouth logo on both shoulders. Now, this board made a secret agreement, even though the rules of the town are that you're supposed to speak openly and be responsive. This group made a secret agreement that they would not answer my questions. Questions concerning the poisoning of children, concentration camp this group set up for 10 people, left us there for 25 months. After I was arrested this week, I was taken to the Hanover Police Department. But when I saw the meeting on videotape, it didn't show the police coming into the meeting, it didn't show them changing. So it really isn't very open meeting about government proceedings. If you don't see that the people who run the meetings are willing to chain people up and have them removed because they try to speak to the new town manager. When they came out of the break, Peter said, he didn't say it was 5 minutes, he said it was 5 or 10 minutes they give. And then he lied and said that because I asked one question becomes 4, 4 becomes 16, and 16 becomes 24, which is just lies. I've never been allowed to ask many questions, and the few questions I have ever asked have never been answered. Now, Article 10 of the Constitution says the government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, not for the private interest or emolument of any one man, family, or class of men. It doesn't say college, we could infer that. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted, public liberty manifestly endangered, and all other means of redress are ineffective, people may and a right ought to reform the old or establish a new government. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. My family has been treated as slaves. We have been treated as second-class citizens. The water was polluted. The state had certified that the Mink Brook was polluted with asphalt waste. This town has neither apologized or taken any accountability for what they did with the college together. The college backed out of the program but never apologized. It still hasn't come clean to the public that they were willing to pollute. I would like to find out the same question I asked last time, and that is, has Alex spoken to the college president?
I believe, I don't know the answer to that question, but I believe Alex gave a full report the last meeting in terms of his updated who he's interacted with.
Say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Alex gave an administrative briefing at the last meeting as to who he has spoken with, and he updated us on that at the last meeting. I do not know if
Private session.
I didn't-
Public session.
public session.
Thank you.
The next order of business is to review and discuss the proposed memorandum of understanding for Hanover and Lebanon water systems interconnection. Peter.
Good evening, Mr. Lackey, for Public Works. So we were approached, actually been working with staff at the city of Lebanon for many years, looking at ways to improve our interconnections with our water system. And there's an opportunity, pretty short order, for the end of the month, we have to negotiate some sort of agreement between the two communities, basically codifying what we've done at staff level for many years. Essentially, it's when one community has a need for water, we can open a valve and we can provide water to Lebanon and vice versa to Hanover. We've used it at times when we were tank. We used water from Lebanon, and when they were building the agency, they used water from Hanover. So there's been a cooperative agreement back and forth, but it's only been a staff level agreements. The funding is from the state, partially from the agency to actually provide funding. The town only has the obligation to provide the valve, which we already have in place if they need to be replaced. So it's not an expense for Hanover. What we're trying to basically ensure that if Lebanon needs water, we can provide water, vice versa, we need water from them. If there's an issue with capacity of, say, drought restriction, or we can't physically move water to them, we'd be limited to what each party could provide, and we'd be responsible for what infrastructure is necessary for serving us, and they'd be responsible for whatever needs to serve them. So it's basically an agreement that we can put in writing and we can do it.
So Peter, my understanding is that connections are basically up at 120.
Yes.
We need to get we need to go another 150 feet up.
Well, there's, the pipes are connected together.
Yeah.
The system in Lebanon is hydraulically about 150 feet higher, so we can't move water to their tank or to the hospital beyond maybe the basement floor. So they have to pump that water to get it up to their tank in the higher up certain hospital, as well as the rest of that zone, which is Centera and housing up in that area.
And the other areas coming up from,
The other one is down on Route 10, just to the south of Wyatt. And it's right now, it's just about there because of the zone. Hanover zone and Lebanon, when they did above the same pressure within the population, so it's just a valve that closed.
so it's basically formalizing the working agreement we've had with Lebanon
Yes.
for many years. Excellent idea.
Authorizing Alex to negotiate the terms just to formalize that agreement.
I move that we formalize the agreement, have Alex negotiate a formal agreement to what Pete just said.
So we authorize Alex to-
To negotiate, to basically put in writing what a memorandum of understanding between the city of Lebanon and the town of Hanover to formalize what we've been doing for years at a staff level
And by the
for
second,
water.
by the second to that. Second. My understanding is there is some time, there's some time urgency here.
And they needed by the end of the month.
Good. So do we need any more formal vote than the one?
Don't think so. Just this.
Okay.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the third item is the continued discussion regarding the proposed adoption of the rental housing code ordinance. This is, that's number 3 on the list. You want me to jump ahead? Should we go to number 4 so you can go home? All right, let's jump to 4, which is the appointment of deputy town clerk.
So I'm about to talk and then what to talk about. I have a few comments. First, I wanted to thank the board, Peter, for the work you put in for the new Hanover town manager. As a new town clerk, I am very appreciating many things about Alex. His support for the town clerk and supervisors and election work, his own experience in municipal positions, his enthusiastic problem-solving mentality, his intelligence, his well-developed care for community well-being, which is becoming more evident the more I speak with him, and that's the part of least sensitivity. So secondly, I want to thank you for being willing to support and fund the appointment of Betsy McCain to deputy town clerk. Betsy has already shared generously many of her hours and knowledge of Hanover protocol, professional protocol, with me. She's very eager to step into the role of deputy town clerk and appreciates any remuneration she can get. She shared with me that she wanted to pay the same amount as the town clerk and super ballot providers because she considers us a team. And I'm very happy about that. Her appointment will allow her access to the statewide voter database, which is essential going forward from today on. So, and one more thing I felt like I wanted to bring up to all of you. The supervisors and I have spent time reviewing the practices and protocols and the election laws, which are changing as we speak around elections. And we're finding things that need to be addressed. Some of them we can address early and some we cannot address now. So, for example, on next Wednesday, August 17th, the state is coming to inspect our ballot boxes and the machines go on top and where we store our ballots. And I have no idea what that will be. I will have the inspection. So, and also transparency is a growing concern for us. We're working with ballots to move offices around so that the election business is more transparent and available to the public. So that feels good to all of us, the supervisor and yourself. Let's see. So my personal hope is that after the elections, all of us elected officials with Alex And so we work together to make sure that the Hanover election procedures continue to be functional and really in compliance with the state laws and up to date. That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're on item number 4, which is the appointment of the deputy town clerk. Alex, you want to add to that or tee it up a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Bobby, for doing that and for all of your work on everything. And yeah, basically the only change that we were making is it was advertised, the deputy town clerk originally was advertised as a position that would do election support work and municipal agent services, vital records, motor vehicles, et cetera. After all of our discussions internally, we realized that the highest priority was support for the elections. And we do have active hiring right now for a second person down in our front office. So that'll take us back up to a staffing level that will be a little bit more sustainable, at least for now. And so I mentioned that in my report last time, but just wanted to call that out again. Yeah, we're happy to appointment between the town clerk and the select board, but very happy to put my thumbs up on it and that everybody's been really cooperative, kind of.
What do you need from us tonight?
Just a vote to approve the appointment
Of Betsy McLean.
of Betsy
Right.
McLean for deputy town clerk.
Wow, that's going to be easy.
Okay, I move that we appoint Betsy
Betsy,
McLean as the deputy town clerk.
So second.
Not a lot of controversy there.
Yeah.
Let's get it done. No controversy. Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Enthusiasm. With enthusiasm.
With enthusiasm. Thank you,
you.
Bobby. Thank you for all your work.
Get us through all this, please. Okay, so the next order of business is the continued discussion regarding the proposed adoption of the rental housing code. My approach tonight is going to be to treat, first of all, a significantly revised draft went out to the board earlier this week. And my hope is, my intention is that we will treat it almost like it's a new ordinance. We'll go back to sort of square one. So tonight I'm hoping to get feedback from the board, questions, additions, corrections, and that after which I will open it to the public if they want to make some comments. We've also committed to having what I'm going to call a working session, which will be a publicly notified session where the interested parties can come together and express their concerns, except we can address their concerns, but it's a working session. That would then be followed by a formal public hearing, after which the board can choose to take action or delay action based upon what we want to do. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do going forward. Does that work for the board?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Okay. And I think there's one more item that you were going to mention about what the town is going to be doing in addition.
Yes, in addition to what you mentioned, we're also we're working on an FAQ document with some of the questions that I know Rob and myself and a few other people have gotten in. And then if we can fit it in this week, Rob and I will also be making our premiere together on the stage. We will be doing a video FAQ as well. So we'll post that on the website and send that around. And so we'll provide the questions and answers in a written format and in a video format, whichever is easier for people. I think we've got about 10 or 12. We're trying to cut down so it's not a 30, 50 question long thing. So whatever questions might come up tonight, or if the board has any questions, we can incorporate that there. If you're curious, I can read out the questions that we have so far, or we can just sort of keep working on it. And our intention is to have that done and out to the public by the end of the week.
Before the working
Right.
session.
That's correct. Before the working session, with enough time that people can review the Q&A before they come into the working session.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. I should indicate I've given to Rob yet additional input, particularly around the definition of, I think if we can make the definition of responsible party a bit more clear. And also under that's under V. And then under make sure I get the numbers right. 7B11B, I think we need to be really clear about what are the criteria for our inspection. So I've suggested some ideas there that you will take under advisement. Then I found I noticed that in 1X9, I guess that is E and E and F, we refer to owner rather than responsible party, which might be correct, might be incorrect. So those were my inputs to Rob relative to this draft. Question board.
Can, I've read it and I was a little overwhelmed by the checklist and I was wondering, which I think is actually good. It's clear and I understand, what you have to do. It's more than I thought. Quite honestly. And so I was just wondering if maybe you could provide, I don't know if it's Alex or Rob could just do a big picture, like, or a summary of what we have.
Yes, I think that addresses, I agree with you, and that addresses my concerns over 7B. What are the criteria? And I suggested that we list the criteria, but what are the rules we're going to follow? Life safety codes. The other ordinances referred to in this amendment, in this ordinance. The nuisance requirements in this ordinance. So those are the three that I picked out specifically that I think we need to list in general. And then Appendix A deals with an example of how those might be applied. So I would go back up one step higher and say, what are the codes that we're going to follow? What life safety standards? What else?
And making sure that they're equally applied across all sectors of the community. I mean, because
That's something we need to address.
it feels like we need to make sure it's reasonable that we're asking, there's this, it passes the reasonable test.
Yep.
In my mind. So it feels like we should not be discriminating against renters or rental properties. We should make sure that, as we're doing, building permits for houses and renovations and the same kind of standards are met. It feels like we are, but it feels, I know no one's looking at my sheets. And so.
Certainly Appendix A woke people up, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So.
So there is a distinction, the corner occupied properties versus rental properties. Rental properties are prescribed, the basic standard prescribed in rental properties to the homeowner living in their own property doesn't have to file.
Okay.
You don't have to have 123 temperatures in the town. You don't have to maintain your heat source that's in your living space at 65 degrees from October to April. That's you have the right to live in a lower standard.
Can I interrupt, Rob?
Yeah.
Are you quoting state statutes or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Building code and NFPA 101 are embedded in adopted state.
Okay.
And rental housing code specifically requires landlords to provide certain things. Water at the tap and 100 is an example. Bedroom, living space temperature at 65 degrees during the heat site. Those are the requirements of the code. It doesn't apply to owner occupied dwellings. That said, when we inspect a property, we inspect them to the same. So
Okay.
Certificate of occupancy is a test of the water temperature, it's a test of the boiler, it's a test of all of those things. Make sure it operates to the basic life safety.
Perfect, thank you. I just needed that clarification.
First, I'd like to say, I love that it was less legalese. I actually understood it almost, so I have a few questions. So on page 4, under Roman numeral 8F, where it talks about if at least 10 residents of Hanover, blah, 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 submit, then the such notice will be delivered by certified mail at least 10 days prior to the date of inspection. Is that a state requirement?
So we have two elements of discussion. One is the registration and inspection process that would certify code compliance in that snapshot in 3 years.
Right.
And then there's another provision in this that would allow 10 residents to file a complaint against the property. At which point we would give notice of the hearing. Unless there was critical life safety. Which we could intervene.
Okay, that was what I was getting to. Just, I mean, when I read this, it appeared to me some law was stating, requiring it. But if 10 residents are bringing something to our attention that's extreme and it's safety, I make the assumption you can get in there pronto. But that doesn't, but you read this, it doesn't seem like you could. That's why I'm just trying to.
So if it is, if it's life safety. It's critical to maintain property. To have a condition, you would inspect. Give notice of inspection, immediately follow the warrant process to get access.
Okay, thanks. And then under G, same page, 1, 2, third paragraph down, I'll let you catch up. Legalese appeared again for me
Yes.
We sure did. Where were you again, Bill?
on
G,
page
last
4, G, the last paragraph, the third paragraph, or
Yeah.
where it says
Yeah.
within 30 days, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there's about 18 legal words in there that
Just try to streamline it.
just a suggestion that.
It's a quote from the statute.
Well, that's, again, it's one of the problems with, I recognize the statute you're up against. It's just wherever you can smooth it out a little bit, I would think it makes sense for the common person such as me to understand it.
But that's right in the statute.
Yeah, well, if you have to quote it, then I understand. I'm just throwing out my comment of if you don't have to ease off a little bit, that's,
If I reword it without changing the meaning.
Yeah. it's just when someone picks it up and reads it, they sit there and after you read that paragraph for the third time and you don't still quite get it, then that's when we run into problems of communication, that's all. But I recognize that there's certain statutes that you must do. That's all. I'm just acknowledging that too. And then under Roman numeral 9, page 5, under B, it says no responsible party or occupant shall cause any heating, electrical, hot water equipment or utility be, you know, such, et cetera. What went through my head there was the smoke detectors and but I mean, it's covered under the long list. But is a smoke detector considered electrical?
No.
So it just struck me as all those things, and one of the most serious things you want to make sure an occupied unit is working is the fire and detect smoke detectors, et cetera. So that's again an observation.
I'll work with Ryan and see how we can cover it. There is jargon in here that's specific to the code.
And then under same section 9, Roman number 9C. Any unit with number 8, any unit with occupancy exceeding limits for the approved use of class established by what's NFPA 101? Just
National Fire Protection Act, it's the life safety code adopted by the state of New Hampshire for the fire marshal.
So again, my suggestion, and I don't know if it was in before, but anytime you have an acronym, I think the practice should be for the first time you mention it, you put the words in and then the letters, and then after that, you just use the letters. But I didn't back up and read to see if that was mentioned before, but just again, just to be helpful. Those are my comments here.
Quick one, Rob, are carbon dioxide units considered part of the life safety
Yes.
code now?
Actually, this fire marshal's office is adopted a specific code. It's more restrictive in the state of New Hampshire than the NFPA 101.
Huh?
So NFPA 101 does not require carbon monoxide detectors and units that don't use fossil fuel as heat source of cooking.
Huh.
So if you have electric baseboard.
Right.
Heat pump. Carbon dioxide detectors aren't required. The fire marshal's office adopted a rule in 2012. Actually, a statute was adopted by legislation based on the recommendation of fire marshal. That places a higher burden in the state of New Hampshire, requires the regardless of fuel source.
Thank you.
Hardwired battery
Good.
in series, so that one goes off in either all.
Oh. Thank you.
I was just thinking about how my CO2 monitor is working, and I'm like, might not be legal. Okay,
And now, now, that a radio frequency read, so the install is not as complicated as having run a daisy chain required each one. So you will install hardwired and have a radio feed.
thank you for that consumer assistance.
I have one in my basement that I assume doesn't work.
Jason to the point.
Yeah.
And it does.
Oh, good.
Why do it, sure.
Oh, that's true. Every once in a while, you're right. Other questions? On the public? All right.
Analysis of Aetna, and then we will also have an interest in condominium. Somebody received an email from the president of our association, and one of the things I mentioned in June is that it seemed like this document didn't necessarily take into consideration the organization of a homeowners association that already runs all of these things, and we already had our occupancy permit for all three buildings almost taken away because our fire alarm system was not to code, and so we were the first ones in town to have this wireless thing, and I have to say, kudos and to the fire department for helping us figure that all out. But, that's an example of where we already sort of have state of the art. We've already had everybody come in and inspect of where everything is. And now we're being told that maybe our tenants need to pay money to have that inspected again when we're already paying, and they're paying incorrectly for that. And then it's frustrating, I have to say, to look at the 7 pages of checklist in one place. It says it needs to be inside the bedroom, which I don't think it is. It's near the bedroom, and that's what it is another place. So the checklist, I think, is confusing. But what I really wanted to talk about for sort of the big issues before we get to a public work session, because I think that we don't have a lot of priority before you get to that the work session will not be as productive as might otherwise. So people just be asking questions, and so I appreciate that a back sheet is being put together. But some of the questions that went, that I've heard back from people, and that I had as well, was what exactly is the definition of a non-owner occupied unit? Again, the condominiums association setting, we have run into needing to find other language for our bylaws, because we have a lot of LLCs that own condominiums, a lot of trusts, we have some estates. Some of them, the people who are in the condominium are principals of the LLC. Others, it is a rental relationship. And so, but those, if it's a non-human entity, they're not dwelling in the unit. So how are you going to determine which units, if it's a trust, and some of them might have your properties in trust, are considered to be owner occupied, and which ones are considered to be non-owner occupied? And I think that people are going to be interested in knowing that, whether their unit would fall under this ordinance or not. I have to say, that also because it says that applicability would apply to owner occupied dwellings with rented rooms. But then look down, so it sort of makes it sound like it might also apply sometimes to owner occupied dwellings. You get down to certificate of compliance, and it basically says it shall be unlawful for anyone to allow any person to occupy any unit without a certificate of compliance. And so the question is, what does it mean to occupy? So say that, you're a parent who have bought a unit for an adult child who is working in a minimum wage job here in town. They are able to live independently, but they need a lot of support. So you've done that. It's not really a rental situation, although maybe the child is paying some towards expenses. So is that child occupying the unit? And does that come under this? Does that family now need to also get a certificate of applying, compliance for the adult child who is in there? I have heard that, what is adopted here will also be for maybe something more of a Airbnb ordinance that maybe will be coming down the height. So, then we're talking about very short periods of time. And then, in what now, I mean, we talked about the situation where maybe we go on sabbatical, we went to rent it out for 3 months, but what if we want to get a house there in 3 months? There's no rental contract. Would we still have somebody in there occupying it? Would that come in here or not? So I think that there's just going to be a lot of questions about when it applies and when it doesn't. And to the extent that can be made just crystal clear, and what criteria you're going to be determining, if this one unit owned by a trust, occupied, and that unit owned by another trust is not. How are you going to determine that? I would say the other thing that maybe isn't making sense to people is the declaration says that it's to establish minimum standards governing the condition and maintenance of dwelling units offered for rent, or maybe just to occupy. But then you look at the checklist, and you get to things like window screens need to be in good repair. What's the definition of good repair? I mean, one hole that's in, an army of mosquitoes. So it's just like the checklist doesn't match the stated purpose. And I think that that's, the question that people say, well, which is it? Are we really looking for the quality of tile on the bathroom floors? How do your sheets look and everything else? Or are we really trying to find things that have critical life safety issues? So I think that there's sort of I don't know, dual personality going on. What are you really trying to do? And to not resolve that question and have a public working session, again, I think it's not going to be as productive. So those would be 3 things that I hope are addressed before any public working session. And then I can say I have talked to several people that came up before. How do we I did start to address this, and I would like to know if you refer to a rental code that stipulates the water temperatures, and I know that's the case for senior facilities, etc. But if I can get a link to what that code is that he's referring to, I appreciate it. Maybe you could even tell me tonight before I leave. But there is just this question. Why do we need, so how do we rationalize saying that we're going to inspect rental units every 3 years, but housing units not? And, of course, in the condominium association, we can have the mere condominium to us. We need to be expected, and the owner next door doesn't, but what they're doing is just as dangerous to my tenant's well-being as what my tenant is doing to their well-being. So the question is, how, when you have those mirror units side by side, that you're treating them differently, it's very hard to understand. And I'd say I did ask the ladies to say, well, what is this based on? And it's the ordinance in Berlin, New Hampshire. I got the things from Rob, thank you, Rob, for 4 other ordinances. And I would say all 5 of them are housing standards, which is just, what that RSA 48 is about, that apply to all dwellings. Of the 5, there are 2 ordinances then that have a section that deal with rental units, Durham and Berlin. I don't know how successful those programs are, but the other three, including Exeter, they just have housing standards ordinance that applies to all dwelling units. And the statute allows, you see that there's a problem, you know, you suspect there's a problem. You inspect the place you think has a problem. You don't inspect many units knowing that most of them are okay, because there are, you have the state of the union. State of the art,
Okay.
you know, fire protection. So that's the last question, is just. how
All right,
do
can
you
I ask,
control?
to the extent we've already received some written questions from you and Sam, if there's anything additional that you brought up tonight, I suggest you, again, briefly put your questions in, that we can try to address them
Yeah.
at the workshop.
Right, but I'm saying that I think that it would be good if some of these things were settled by the board before you get to the workshop, because the feedback we would get. You know, if you have a very broad set of dwellings across town that would, and situations that would fall into this, I think you're going to get one set of, you know, people. And if it's defined very narrowly, you know, then I think you'll, you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, it doesn't find me, I don't need to go. So I think that, you know, it would be useful for the board to decide ahead of time. Are you having very broad or, you know, broad applicability, or are you having rather narrow? Just about that, I just don't see how that. Be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, board, I guess. I'll just speak up. I think we're committed to a rental ordinance. And that's, you know, that's something we've tried to deal with for almost 3 years. And I think we're committed to a rental ordinance. Rob has already spoken to the different standards of a house versus a rental unit. They're governed by different codes in this town and by the state. Just do you think we need to address anything more than that before the working session? Bill?
Every time we talk about this topic, the complexities just compound.
Yes.
And so the number of points Corey made, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I didn't know that. I didn't think of that. So I would agree that if we could, you know, maybe through the staff work, get your frequent, you know, your Q&A together and maybe share it with a few key, very strong interested parties out there, and see what their reaction is before you get into a room with, make up a number, 25 people, and they're all coming at it from a different angle. You're not gonna accomplish anything in that meeting. So maybe if we can narrow the issues down a little bit with, the Q&A, would probably be very helpful.
Do you
Yeah,
want me to
that's
read
fine.
off the questions we've got so far? Would that be helpful, or
Sure.
not the whole thing?
Leave
Just
it up.
all right, so far, so Rob, you've seen some of these, I think. The number one, why is town doing this ordinance? Don't we have something on the books from 2013? What problems does this address? What are the goals? Number two, what happens to a tenant if a landlord receives a violation? Does the tenant have to vacate? How does that work? Number three, who does this cover and who's considered an owner, individuals, entities, etc. Number four, what is the reason for the limitation on 3 unrelated individuals? Number five, do units that are currently renting get grandfathered or not? Number six, what types of inspection criteria are covered or what are not? And there's sort of, I've got a kind of a green box and a red box with some examples of different things, and then a link to the full description what we're working on. How much will this cost? Who will be responsible for inspections and enforcement? And what can a renter or tenant do if they believe something is wrong with their rental unit? So those are the questions so far that seem to represent most of the questions that we've gotten. But Kari, or if anybody's that's listening, if you have any other questions, you know, send them over. Rob and I can talk about it. We can try to figure out, and maybe we can add. I tried to keep it to 10, Rob. But we can obviously add a couple if they're relevant.
Those are good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think they're all good. but yeah, and I'll go back to Kari's point. We're in the condominium complex, which they have already do a lot of things to make sure things are okay. How much more does the town require at a cost? And I think that's a fair question. That just, to me, it's different than standalone rental house. That the only person looking over it is the owner or, and the occupant. So I think there's a difference there that I'm not sure what the answer is, but I just recognize there's a difference. So something that's gonna come up.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
I think it goes back to what's a rental unit? I mean, a rental unit, whether it's a condominium or a house or whatever, I don't see the difference. If it's a rental unit, it's a rental unit. It's gonna come under this.
Yep.
Ordinance.
Same with the ownership. That's basically the answer. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as entities, whether it's an LLC or a trust, you can sort of imagine as a pass through. And it's going to be treated the same. And it's really not about what entity is in ownership, but who the resident is in the unit. Is that right, Rob?
So in short, this issue did come up, so.
Rob,
You're doing it.
Sorry, I know that. This issue came up several years ago, when another LLC was trying to require fairly large bed and breakfast at the road. The intent was to have 10 separate owners, not related as a family, own and occupied. But, so we did that to council. The answer was that did not constitute an occupied unit. In my opinion, it's an attempt to run the zoning and life safety code, which are two elements to describe occupancy. So if we're talking about an LLC occupying a unit, that's different than an LLC renting. If we're talking about a trust owning a unit and occupying it, that's different than a trust owning a unit and renting. We regularly deal with trusts and LLCs looking to acquire properties, oftentimes for a parent for their student, and looking to offset the cost of that investment by figuring out a way around the occupancy limits both in life safety and in the zone. I know for the last year, we have over $1 million sales, and obviously trying to offset that expense by increasing the occupancy is something that most people will probably try to figure out. But that said, I've asked council to do Carver's Act questions specifically in response to the guidance from council.
okay. Does the board feel we need to meet again before this goes to the working session?
No, I think the FAQs should be completed though. I mean, you could share the FAQs with us and,
Would you like me to send that, Peter, to you or to the board before?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think at least for sure, one of us will be at the working session, if not more, if people want to be there, can be there.
And we should intend on noticing it such that you all could be there. Is that correct?
I think you schedule it whenever you think you're going to get the best participation. And we'll, as many of us who can be there, we'll make sure at least one of us is there. As for listening, more just for listening primarily.
Is Alex's question, and posting it such that if all of us turn up, we will not be in jeopardy.
Yeah.
You have to post it as a public meeting.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what.
So that you all could go if
Yeah,
it were,
that's what
okay.
you're asking.
Rob,
It's not necessary to post it as a select board meeting. You're not. It's not action of the board.
yeah,
You can attend as a member of the community or as a select board member, as long as you're not.
whatever we need to do to legally be right, we'll do what's
Well,
legally right.
okay.
Okay,
thanks, everyone.
any further discussion on this? We got again, housing code.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
I do.
Okay. I do feel like we're making progress.
Yes,
This
one is a huge step forward. It's good.
Okay, where are we? Oh, right. I move that we approve the copier leases for planning, zoning, and codes office and the Hanover Fire Department, and to authorize town manager to sign all necessary documents.
Second.
Questions? These are normal, these are part of the budget process, these are all anticipated.
That's correct.
Further discussion, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Approved unanimously. I move that we approve the administrative correction for property located at 56 Greensboro Road.
I'll second that,
Yes.
but can you explain this? Because I don't quite understand.
sure
So
you
they're
can.
being abated, so they don't have to pay because the owners now own that land? Is that your understanding? And I didn't
will
quite
look-
understand. I read it through and it was not clear to me. So this is Silent Brook, I think. And they, before April 1st, they acquired the third phase of what was going to be housing development. It is now part of their common lands. And so the town is abating that tax bill.
That is my understanding, because the common land is not part of any individual.
So I don't, and there, I mean, Norm's calling it an administrative correction, but it's taxes that we were anticipating. And I'm just wondering if that taxes are gonna
Can
be
we-
charged to
Can we just
post it,
postpone this and ask Norm to give us some additional clarity?
I believe that would be fine to do, and I can get a little more information from him for the next one.
So we'll-
sorry, I just
That's
didn't,
okay.
I didn't follow
I
it.
read this and just trusted Norm had it right.
Well,
I
and
didn't
he
quite know-
probably does, and you would think, since I'm on that
I agree.
advisory committee, I would understand it, but I don't.
Okay, so we'll, what's the word?
Postpone,
Table this
table it.
till the next meeting and get additional word from Norm.
Are they incurring interest? An unpaid bill or?
That I'm not sure, sorry.
Okay, just table.
Okay.
I move that we approve the request for elderly exemption for property located at 55 Stevens.
I'll second that.
I do have an update that didn't make it into the final packet, if you'd like that. at this
Sure.
Point, so I'll post this, I'll update the post on the website with this, but, so this is actually the first time, as far as Norm is aware, that we are approving an elderly exemption in a select board meeting. Before, the director of assessing kind of did it on their own, and he believes the proper procedure is for the select board to approve it. With other exemptions, such as the veterans exemption, the property address is listed on the agenda. We did speak with our attorney, and we did have some question about it. I know Carl, you sent in a question, and we did look into it. Basically, the question is sort of, should we post the address or not? Are we legally obligated one way or the other? Our attorney advised us that we can do it either way. There's a pro and con to either side of that, but I wanted to make sure to mention that to the board, that the select board can decide if there's a preference, whether you'd like the address to be listed the same way they're done with the veterans exemptions, or if we'd like to have not have the address listed because maybe there's a question about sensitivity because of income and finances. So, Norm and I discussed it. You think there's pros and cons to either way. If we had 100 of these exemptions happening every meeting, would imagine the public would like to know what the addresses are. But of course, you could also imagine that there's a potential interest in the privacy of the individual. And so we're happy to talk more about it, but that didn't make it into the final report.
So there are criteria for the elderly exemption,
That's correct.
and this particular application meets
Meets
those
the criteria. That's correct.
So let's move on this one, and then we can talk about the general issue of, do we want to post an address?
Sure.
Questions on this one, or was it moved and seconded? Okay. I moved it. Did anybody second it?
Second.
Oh, good. So further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
No. Aye. Okay, my preference would be not to list the address.
I agree.
Okay.
I'm saying this.
I don't see any
Yeah.
value.
Does the board have to approve these, or can this be assigned as a staff decision?
The board does, that is Norm's position, that the board, the proper procedures, the board approves them, but we don't have, they review all the materials, and in fact. The tax office is actually required to destroy the records that were provided to justify the income-based exemption. And so our attorney has advised us, as far as I understand it, that we can go either way here, and we're perfectly comfortable, going forward, not listening to address if that's the preference of the board.
And is Norm's position also that he would only bring forward property that meet the criteria, so we are not sitting here looking. at
That's
the
correct.
criteria and making it a judgment.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Would you agree with no addresses? I think the guidance is no addresses, please.
Okay, will do.
Yeah, just again, I think no address is the way to go. My question is, which I think you answered, but. Is it required under statute that the board approve these items individually, which lists information that's, for some people, private? So that's, I'm trying to, does it have to come to the select board, or because we approved the policy, why can't the director of assessor just fulfill the policy? That's what I'm trying to clarify. If Norm's interpretation is
Yeah.
we have to approve it,
That is,
end of
that's
discussion.
his position.
Okay.
I can go back and ask him more detail. We did talk about it today, and
Yeah,
he believes
if he's stating that based on the
he
statute,
is, yeah.
then there's no decision here. We have to do it.
And his response to that was from it being done a prior way, and this is the way that he believes that it should be done.
Like, correct me, I think there's a preference on the board that if he dealt with as an administrative matter and not brought to the select board, but if there's rules and regulations that make us bring it here, then we have no choice.
So I can go back and talk to Norm if there is any ability, or maybe there is a broader policy the select board can create, that I don't know. If there is the ability for this to be done administratively, that would be the board's preference. If not, the board's preference would be to not bring the addresses in.
It may be the case that Norm is looking for more transparency and bringing the whole process up a level in terms of, public knowledge.
He, during the Board of Assessors meeting, my understanding, it's like Alex's, is that he didn't feel he had the authority to do this, that it was a select board decision, that a select board had to vote on this.
Yeah, that he was recommending
That,
based on
So if there's a way for us to give him that authority, let's find out.
I'll look into that. We'll speak with our
I
attorney.
assume that's what the board.
Yeah.
Wants to do.
Yeah.
Just come up pretty infrequently.
he needs to
Yeah,
remember that we're a select board too. Versus a board of select men.
yes,
He sometimes forgets that.
I will make sure going forward.
Oh. The next item is to review the veterans credit request for property located at 5 Storrs. And it's my understanding that this has been denied by,
Not denied, but
not approved. Not approved, right? So
he recommended denial as his words.
That is correct.
recommended that not be approved. So can you, I assume it didn't meet, those are just stated criteria, right? I mean, those are
Yes,
quantitative things.
yes,
You have to show
and
these
because there's an
so-
appeal, I would probably err on the side of not going into more detail while the appeal is happening in public.
Oh, okay, I thought the appeal came to us. No, the appeal is going to,
No, it's
sorry.
it's the state, what is it? The State Board of Tax and Land Appeals.
okay, so all we have to, what's our job tonight?
Is to vote on the denial,
Okay, affirm the denial.
affirm the denial, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I move that we affirm the denial.
I'll second.
Further discussion?
So affirm the you have to do it that way?
I don't know. And that's what I'm asking. What vote do you need from us tonight?
Recommend the
Accept the
denial.
recommendation.
We recommend the denial.
Accept the recommendation.
Yes.
That it not be approved.
That's correct.
I modify my motion to accept the recommendation that it not be approved. How's that? That work?
It's less confusing.
Oh, good. So is the same, do you hear us on the
I'll
second?
second that.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Um. Okay, so we have, I move that we adopt the abatements as recommended by the advisory board of assessors. And those were listed in number
There's
8,
a whole package.
the whole package here. Is there any question about any of the items in number 9 in the packet?
So my understanding, this is another example of
We just.
we have
accept.
no authority to reject these or
Well-
change the decision.
We have authority, but we as a rule don't,
All right, so
right?
maybe.
We accept them as presented by the advisory
We
board
don't
because
have
they've reviewed
You don't have
it.
to accept?
You don't have to accept them.
See,
That's
I
my
had the
understanding.
impression that we're rubber stamping things on these lists, that's all. And if I'm wrong, I'm.
I believe we
glad.
can step in if we wish to.
Okay, all right, I did not understand that.
But we, yes, I think that is our prerogative if we wish to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, do we have a motion? Or no?
No, we don't.
Okay, good.
I move we adopt the abatements as recommended by the advisory board of assessors.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They pass. They are adopted. Minutes of July 25th.
Oh. I just thought that, I'll move that we approve the minutes of July 25th.
Second.
I would like to offer an amendment to them.
Please.
I just think that we should, in the second paragraph of number 1, item 1, I think we should, the board recess the meeting for, it was more than several minutes. It should be the exact time, which was just so we have a record.
Okay, so you're,
I'm saying the board recessed the meeting for, I think it was like 15 minutes, wasn't it?
We can certainly look it up.
It was about that.
Is the public want to ask the question?
no.
Peter,
Yes,
I look up the word adjourn and it does fit here. So recess and adjourn are relatively.
The same.
equivalent.
I mean, adjourned is fine. I just think, I think we should have the time that we,
Yeah.
just so we have a record of
The
how.
time, and the end time.
Yeah.
Right,
So we left the
recessed
the
at,
recess at
reconvene.
7:45 and we came back in at 8 o'clock or
You
whatever it
mentioned
was,
the
so,
state coming in and changing.
and, we could say due to, then we don't need to say anything else. We can just say that it was recessed. Or
I
adjourned.
think we need to
Adjourned is
do,
fine.
I think we need to do better on that first
I was
that
gonna
first-
say,
that first sentence. We really need to be
I,
more explicit about what
well,
happened.
I was,
I
I
have
had
some recommendations, but I suggest we not move on
approved,
these minutes tonight.
I'll table that motion.
Okay, and I'll provide some additional wording for number 1. Bring it back at the next meeting, but I think we need to be more explicit. Okay, so we will not move on these tonight. Okay, we need a motion to, no.
No,
Okay.
we tabled it.
Table, they're tabled. Administrative report.
so I mentioned in the report that, I was sort of aiming towards providing a more detailed report once a month.
Yep.
And so I did one at the last meeting, we'll do one at the next meeting. The only update that I, thought I would provide is just the first episode of Hanover Happenings went out. I've gotten, some good feedback on there. And I think there were about 120 listens, over the first first 3 days. And so I've gotten some nice feedback. I think it's going to go out in some of our organizations we work with, like Vital Communities and UVBA. I think they're going to put it out to their members as well. And so if people listen to it and have any feedback, please send it over. Definitely not wed to any sort of particular exact way of doing it. But that's it. And then I'll have a full report again for next month. And of course, like I mentioned, if you all would like, twice a month reports, I can definitely do that. But I figure I would sort of save up all the words for once a month.
That works for me.
Yeah, I like that.
If there's anything that's pressing that comes up,
Yes.
though, I think you should use these meetings to share it because we are on TV and
I won't
that's what
delay
the board's
anything.
here. Great.
Okay,
Key guidelines, no surprises.
right.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. I'm glad you're getting some feedback.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
I did watch it.
Okay, select board reports. Right.
I don't have anything to report.
Nothing to report.
Just a report that we've had some interested citizens out in Etna who have been frustrated with lack of traffic calming through Etna Village. And one individual particularly approached me. I involved the police and they immediately responded. And we had a meeting out in Etna with some ideas about how to maybe address those issues. I was under the impression that we could not patrol on state roads. That's not the case. We can enforce speeding and other load limits and that sort of thing on state roads. So I was very pleased that we were able to have a meeting so quickly, and we'll see what the state's willing to do, what we can do. But I wouldn't be too surprised if you see some traffic calming activity going through that, whether it be signage, whether it be blinking lights to let people know how fast they're going. But I think we're off to a good start in trying to address that problem, which has sort of been festering for a while.
Yeah.
Actually, related, traffic. My question is, when are we going to get around town the green urban compact? Signs?
Around the way.
Yeah, there's, the bike walk committee did meet last week and I did go to part of the meeting and the committee did report about the signage, the signs are in. Oh, it's not here of the 20, it's 25 miles an hour from here unless it's posted otherwise. And so I think they've arrived or I don't know where I saw it. I think Jenny Chamberlain reported
Send
that.
an email.
Yeah, she sent an email out.
I've just been driving lately, the last couple of weeks, as if I lived in the urban compact. Gotten a few, failures, so. It's fun.
Athens, anything to report?
Nothing to report, no comments.
No.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Any other business to come before the meeting of the board? There's been a request for a non-public session to discuss items pursuant to RSA 91A32A, C, and E. No other business is intended to be brought by the board.
Really?
Yeah.
When that's,
It's been forever.
it has,
The answer is other business is to be determined by the board.
you're criminals. You're absolute criminals, all of you.
Anyway, non-public session.
Bill Garrity, yes.
Rita Christie, yes.
Nancy Carter, yes.
Joanna Whitcomb, yes.
We are in non-public session.
Are you guys? No, are you done?
Yeah, we're actually going to use this room as soon as you are. As soon as you have the call.
Get the office, please.
Need this all.